Alright guys, today we're making a start on the twin turbo build. Like I said in the previous video though, there's going to be quite a wait between this video and the next sort of twin turbo related one where we actually start doing the turbo stuff. Today we're just going to be doing some sort of prerequisite supporting mods like the fuel system and also this plenum spacer, which the plenum spacer is not really anything to do with the turbo directly. If you don't know what it basically is a spacer that goes in this gap here, raises the intake plenum slightly. Obviously you've got to space this up as well. It just means you get slightly more volume of air in the intake plenum, which is supposedly a good thing. But yeah, there's that, which we may as well just do because of how cheap and how easy it is to install, really. We may as well do while we've got everything apart anyway. So we'll do that. Also, hopefully the gains that you get with it will be slightly amplified once we've gone forced induction, because then more air means more charged air. So hopefully that'll help slightly. But yeah, other than that, we've got all this stuff, which is the kind of main focus of this video, which is basically a fuel return system. We've got some 600cc injectors, a fuel pressure regulator, some new fuel rails, and then, like I say, all the return stuff. Now, I'll try and explain what all this stuff is for. Again, I'm learning this as I go along, so don't expect this to be perfectly accurate, but this is my understanding. Right, to start with, we've got some bigger injectors. We've got 600cc fuel injectors, and on this car, basically, the cc of the injectors, the capacity, is pretty much what they can handle horsepower wise. So 600cc injector will be good for up to about 600 horsepower on this engine, roughly, which will be more than enough for me for the foreseeable future. So the reason for not going like really high spec, like 1000cc injectors or whatever, is because then I believe, and again don't quote me, I believe you lose some of the control at the lower RPMs where you need less fuel. So like you'll probably have like quite a rough idle and low RPMs, which it doesn't really seem like it's worth having any kind of disadvantage down low when I'm not going to be going anywhere above 600 horsepower for a long time. So like I said in the original video, my goal is like between 400 and 500 to start with, so these will last a long time. If we do need to upgrade them in future, it's not the end of the world. We've also got an upgraded fuel pump, which is like a 340 litre per hour one, which may be a little bit overkill, but we'll see. And then the rest of it is pretty much for the fuel return system. The way the fuel return system works is in the standard setup, you've got fuel being pumped from the fuel tank into the fuel rails and the injectors, which you'll see in a minute when I get everything taken apart. And then that's it. There's no way for it to go anywhere else, right? In a return system, what you've got is, as you can probably guess, a route for it to get back, the fuel that is, to get back from the pressure regulator, which is one of the things we're going to install, back to the fuel tank. So what that means, and again, I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding of it is, it basically leads to you having more control over the exact amount of fuel and more stable fuel pressure, because you can set this fuel pressure regulator to like a certain amount of fuel pressure, like 60 psi or whatever, and then it will keep it at that exact pressure. Because it can bleed off any extra fuel back to the tank, and also it's right near the fuel rails and injectors and everything, and also, quite importantly for us, you've got presumably this part here, which is like a boost or a pressure sensor, I guess you'd call it. It's not a sensor, but basically what it does is it will adjust the fuel pressure that it's sending out based on how much pressure is in the intake manifold. So in our case, that's going to be very useful because we're going to be boosted. So we're going to have a lot more pressure building up basically inside the intake ports and in the combustion chamber. That pressure, like say we're running like 1 bar of boost, that's like 1 bar of pressure that's trying to push the fuel back up the fuel rails essentially and back up the ports. So you have this, which will adjust for that extra pressure. And yeah, then we've got upgraded fuel rails. I'll be honest, I'm not sure exactly what is better about them. They came with the whole fuel return system, so it's not like I specifically wanted these, but it was just like, well, I'm assuming there's a reason that they're better. They must be slightly better designed than the stock ones. And then the rest of it is pretty much all just lines and T-pieces and stuff. There's all sorts of shit in here that will basically set up the fuel return system. We've got a little gauge that we can put on the fuel pressure regulator, see what pressure we're running at. And yeah, the rest of it is all just lines to run from the fuel rails and the regulator and everything to the fuel tank, which is going to be fun running that line because it's got to go underneath the car and then over the fuel tank and all sorts of stuff. And yeah, that's pretty much it really. I'm going to get started. I guess first thing we need to do is just take the strut bar off, undo all the bolts on the plenum and the intake and everything, take that off, and then we'll kind of just see what it looks like at that point really, and just see if we can find the fuel rails and everything and get all them off, get the new rails and injectors on, and yeah, take it from there. So let's get started. Right, so I've got the top of the plenum off. This is what it looks like underneath for anyone who's curious. Now, I will say I've seen pictures of the next step where you take this bit off as well, and it's not actually how I imagined it. I thought, because this is a V6, I thought this was like the air intake. I thought like the ports would be directly sort of under here, basically. Obviously because you've got the V6, so it makes sense, but you'll see in a minute when we get this off that the air intakes are actually all down the middle. So that's kind of surprising to me, but maybe that's just because I don't know anything about engines. But yeah, one thing I've noticed is it's a little bit oily in here. It's not as bad as it looks on that on the footage there, but it is a little bit oily. There's a little bit of sort of residue in there. So that is another reason to be getting a catch can, which I have actually got and I just never got around to installing, because these aren't particularly bad for it when you're not turbo, but once we go turbo and start getting a bit more blow by and stuff, we'll fit the catch can. But yeah, let's start taking this one apart. Doesn't look too difficult. There's just a few bolts around the edge and then these ones in the middle, and we'll lift this off. Alright, we're getting somewhere. We've got this second part of the intake off. So yeah, these are what we're going to be replacing. The fuel rails, which they do look tiny and shit compared to the new ones, but yeah, and the injectors which are attached to the underneath of them. But yeah, if anyone's curious about this, it's just basically a load of ports on the side that feed into this middle section. So if we turn upside down, you see, I have no idea why it works like that. Like, why isn't it just a load of holes in the middle if that's where it's going to end up? I don't know, but that's how it works. Right, for this next bit, we need to raise the car up, I think, because there's a connector right down in there that we need to undo. Because we're going to be taking this off, which is what actually feeds the fuel rail. So it's a fuel damper, apparently. No idea what it does. Damps the fuel. Fuel's already pretty damp, isn't it? Right, so as you can see, we've got the car up in the air now. And the bit that we want to undo, I believe, is that thing right there. Right, that was fun. I got fuel everywhere. But basically, just pry this cover off the connector. I've wrapped it in some bubble wrap and cable tie at the moment just to keep it airtight, well, vaguely. But yeah, then there's just two tabs, those green bits that you press in and then disconnect it. It is a bit of a twat, I'll be honest. I had to use like some mole grips to clamp the tabs down and then some pliers to push the other bit and then my hands, and then yeah, fuel went everywhere when I disconnected it. But it's done now, so we'll lower it back down and carry on up to top. Right, so we've got the fuel rails and the injectors off the car now, and then this is the new setup that we're going to be sorting out. First thing that stands out is that these old ones use like a little clip, and this metal part here that seats around like a sort of lip, this part here. And the new ones don't seem to have any kind of lip, it's just literally a hole that the injector is going to slide into. It shouldn't matter really, because you're going to have these 4 bolts here like holding the fuel rail on top of the injector, holding everything down onto the air intake. So in theory, nothing can actually go anywhere, but then I don't really know why they use these clips in the first place. But yeah, we can't reuse them, so we'll just basically lubricate these O-rings slightly. I think it says to just use some fresh engine oil, and then just slide them in there with a fair bit of force, and they should go in. It turns out these injectors actually come with a little packet of lubrication stuff, so that's good. It's tight, but they do go in. Cool. Don't know quite how far to push them in. Actually, no, they sort of seat after a while. You can't get them any further, so that is cool. Right, we've got the new fuel rails in, which was a bit of a pain. Carl came and gave me a hand. Hi, Carl. Thank you. He gave me a hand getting those in. So they're all in now, but we found yet more problems with the kit, and that is that this part here is supposed to go into the bottom of the fuel rail, bottom of the fuel regulator, sorry, and attached to the short line, or the -4 line, sorry, the long line, that goes off to the fuel pump. Problem is, I don't know if you can see in there, but that is not chamfered at the bottom, it's just a flat edge. This fitting they've sent us is chamfered and bottoms out before it gets to the point where the O-ring actually seals around the edge here. So the plan that we've come up with is to basically cut the end off this, which again is not ideal, but we kind of don't have a choice. And we've put the rest of it together, we've put that together, we've put all these together, which we did just by going off the pictures more than the instructions because they were pretty terrible. But yeah, what we've got to do next, I can't remember. What are we doing? Right, after a lot of fucking about, we've just got the fuel tank out. I'll show you where it came from, just so you know what's going on. We didn't film it because we were too busy chasing bolts that we lost and stuff. But yeah, that came out of there. So now we're going to put the new pump in and make some modifications to this so that it'll basically accept the return line. Right, we've got a new fuel pump that we just had a lot of fun putting the colostomy bag on. No, that's not what it technically is, but it looks like it. This is the bit where it might need modifying. This is the bit where I thought it would need modifying, so that it'll fit in there. Because what a lot of people have to do is elongate these. Fuel everywhere. Oh yeah, fuel's going everywhere. We've bathed ourselves in fuel. Do you want to put it upside down and just piss fuel everywhere, and then we'll do it? Is it too tall or no? Oh, it's close. Oh, he's in. Kind of.
It might need a little trim.
A little trim.
That's so tight.
Okay, little trim. Little trim. Right, you missed out all the amazing filing action, but we've trimmed these to basically elongate these holes, so now it fits on a slightly bit further down than it was before, basically. So we're all good. Plug the fuel pump itself back in, I think. Yep, kind of. There we go. Now we've plugged the fuel pump in. We've got to put these little things in, which we took a picture of to make sure we remember where they went. Got some springs and stuff to put in. Actually, don't put it all back together yet because we've got to drill some holes, haven't we?
Good point.
Yep, we've got to drill some holes. Right, let's drill some holes. Right, I can't remember what the last thing we filmed was. I think we were having a lot of fun getting this in. Basically, oh yeah, AM didn't supply us with 2 nylon washers like they're supposed to, so we've only used 1. There's supposed to be 1 on the top as well. We also had a bit of fun with the drill, making a slight hole, but whatever. We've kind of got around that. There is an O-ring under that washer as well. Now we've got to replace this factory pressure regulator with, oh, don't drop that. With the block off thing that loops round to this. So how's this work then? We've got the fuel return coming in here and then goes into there, which just feeds it, what, back into the pump? Back into the tank? Right, this is our fuel pump assembly all done pretty much. It didn't go particularly smoothly, did it? But we've made it work. We're fairly happy that it's going to be all sealed and everything. That's what the underneath looks like. We had to grind a load of the webbing stuff off, and then yeah, a bit of fun with the washers and the stuff. This is really tight. Like, it was a bit of fun trying to get that all in there. But it's pretty much ready. The return line is going to go into there. And like we said, it loops around back into where the old fuel pressure regulator was. So let's stick it back in the tank. Right, we've got the fuel pump back in with our new fitting on and everything, and now we've got to feed this really long -4 line basically around the fuel tank and underneath the car, which is going to be the tricky bit, and which is why I asked for Carl's help, because I think doing this with one person would be a pain in the ass. So basically we're going to raise it up. He's going to try and just sort of poke it around everything, which is going to be really awkward. We've attached some TIG filler rod to it, and we're going to just poke that down, see if we can find a path under the car around the fuel tank and everything. And then I'll grab it from underneath. So let's give that a go. Right, with 2 people it wasn't actually that bad feeding it down through here, just pulling on the TIG wire to get it down. Now what we're doing is trying to reuse the stock like line holders, whatever the fuck they're called, brackets. As you can see, Carl is feeding it through there nicely, because for some reason they actually leave a hole, like a spare line hole. And look, that fits in there beautifully. So we're going to do that all the way down. There is one at the end that's bolted on that might give us a bit more of a problem than these ones, but we're getting there. Right, we've pretty much run all the lines now, just got everything to pretty much where it needs to be, tighten everything up. We did sort of fire the car up a couple of times, well, not fire it up, but just prime the fuel pump a few times by turning the ignition like half on. And found a couple of leaks. Some of these T-pieces we didn't do up quite tight enough, so we've fixed all that. And yeah, now it's hitting like the right sort of fuel pressure, so we're just mounting the fuel pressure gauge properly. And then we should be pretty much done, really. Got to put the plenum and everything back on, and then make sure it actually starts up. I spoke to Mark at Abbey Motorsport about whether or not it would actually run with the bigger injectors and everything without it being mapped, because I want to just start it up and drive it onto the trailer. And he said that as long as we set the fuel pressure regulator, which is what Carl's mounting now, as long as we set that down to like 48 psi, it should at least just start up and run. Obviously I'm not going to actually be driving it much, I'm just literally going to reverse out of here, drive it onto the trailer, and that's it, and just check for any leaks or anything. But at least that should be enough to just get it down to him. Right, we kind of skipped forward a bit here. We just spent the last few minutes just putting everything back together, and also remembered to put the plenum spacer on, which is that little sandwich bit there. Kind of looks like a big Oreo, doesn't it? Just me? Good. So yeah, we're going to just do all the bolts up now. Obviously get longer bolts for the plenum spacer to replace everything, because now it's a bit thicker. We have had to put this crappy evap thing back in for now, and then we just kind of hacked off the part of the fuel rail that not controls it, but that just literally joins the two bits of hose together until I get a proper connector, or until we just rip this whole thing out. And we've got the fuel pressure doofer mounted back there. This gets in the way of that a bit, but again, it's only very temporary until I get something to block that intake port off and get rid of the whole evap system. But yeah, other than that, it's gone fairly well. We did have a few leaks, like I said. We sorted all them out, just tightened stuff up, rerouted some hoses, made everything nice and neat, and now we're just putting stuff back together. So yeah, shove that on. That's tight. That's kind of it. So we're going to fire it up once this is all on, just to make sure it works, but I'm not actually going to sort of run it for long or drive it properly, because obviously everything's not been remapped since having bigger injectors and different fuel setup and everything, so it's not going to run very well. But at least we'll be able to just triple check there's no leaks or anything, make sure it does run. So yeah, let's finish off tightening all these up, and then we'll do that. Alright, we're just going to turn the ignition half on, prime the fuel pump, and then go check the pressure gauge quickly. It won't actually be at the exact right pressure now, because it just sort of primed it briefly and then drops. You can see that's at just under 40 psi at the moment, but like I say, it slowly drops after it first primes. So we think we've got it to about the right state, because it will increase a bit when we actually start the engine and the fuel is pumping constantly. So we're going to start it up, see what happens. It's closer to 50 psi now, that's about what we wanted. Alright, so everything is pretty much done. Like you've just seen, the car runs. I'm not going to fire it up much, because obviously it's not going to be set up very well. And we're just adjusting the fuel pressure to try and like compensate for the different setup with the injectors and everything. So yeah, I'm literally just going to start it just to turn it around and put it on the trailer and take it to get mapped, which will be a separate video. There'll be a full video on the mapping. We'll see. I'm not expecting any particularly high figures or anything like that, but place your bets down in the comments of what peak horsepower you think it's going to make. Yeah, the mods that we've got are literally just like the plenum spacer, decats, and the new fuel system. But in theory, I don't think the new fuel system should actually give you any more power or anything like that. But yeah, this is all, like I say, just kind of supporting stuff that's ready for the turbo. So it'll also be getting a new ECU, but again, I'll explain all that in the next video, which will be the mapping one. At the moment, I'm just going to be doing some stuff with the battery, running a new fuse box, and also making a new floor. I'll give you a sneak preview. This will be a separate video coming in the next few days, I think. But yeah, I'm going to be making a new fuse box and this floor, which is not quite finished yet. Same on the driver's side, I've still got that to do, but it's getting there. It's getting there. Like I say, there'll be a separate video on all that stuff, sort of explaining what I'm doing and why. But for now, we're pretty much done with this. One thing I will say is the kit, which was the AAM Stage 1 fuel return kit, I think that was the full title of it. Like the quality and everything of all the parts was good, but the instructions was shocking, and like the parts list that was in the instructions was barely relevant. Half the stuff was either missing or different. We wasted a lot of time trying to figure out one of the connectors down here, where basically they sent us a completely different way of doing it to what's shown in the instructions and what other people have got in their kit. Some of the O-rings were missing, some of them were duplicated. There was like two of one of the T pieces, I don't know where it's gone now. Give me an extra one of the pieces. There was some washers missing. One of the pieces we had to grind down, like you saw in the video. So yeah, like it all worked fine. Like I say, it's all working. It all seems high quality once it's in. But actually figuring out how to do it all when the instructions they give you are so bad was not great. And I think if Carl hadn't come to help me, I would have struggled. So yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot about like how the fuel system works and everything. And it's like, obviously I knew in theory how stuff worked, but it's very different when you actually see everything and, you know, undo it all and put it all in yourself. You get a much better understanding of things. So yeah, it's definitely, it's been a good experience. Hopefully nothing leaks or anything. I am kind of wary of like potential fire issues now, because when we first like started it up the first few times, it did leak. Obviously we've sorted all those leaks, but I'm just wary that if something comes loose or whatever, it could be spraying fuel everywhere. So I think I'm going to look into like a proper fire suppression system, which we are supposed to have anyway. Well, it's advised to have in like BDC and Drift Cup. It's not mandatory. You just have to have a fire extinguisher in the car, which most people say is a bit lax. Like they say you should really have a full fire suppression system. So that's something that I'm going to look into. We'll do a separate video on that if I end up plumbing all that in. But yeah, the next video will be either the stuff about the fuse box and the fan setup and the floor, which I'll just group all that into one video, or it will be the video of going to get mapped. So whichever one it is, I'll see you there.